54% of people in construction in the last year reported suffering from anxiety and depression. And you might say, Eric, that's not bad. But did you know that's double the average of the general population in terms of reporting anxiety and depression? Of that 54%, 39% of them would feel ashamed about talking about the issues that they're struggling with. And we can also understand that many times when we have issues in our lives, it's difficult to open up and talk about them. The good news is that 94% of people surveyed in construction would be willing to assist someone who is having issues with mental health, anxiety, or depression. And this is a tremendous issue in construction because it directly affects the performance of the most valuable part of the construction industry, and that is people in the field. It's a safety issue, it's a production issue, it's a profit issue, it's a human issue. And today on Construction Genius, Dan Lester, the Vice President of Field Culture and Inclusion at Clayco, is here to discuss mental health in construction. And he is a driving force behind Clayco's commitment to creating a psychologically safe work environment. And in today's episode, we dive into all of that and what that means and how you in your company can create an environment where people are comfortable about talking about their mental health challenges, and as a result of that, create a more profitable, sustainable, healthy, and productive environment. Great conversation here with Dan. You're going to want to listen to every single aspect of it. Check out the links in the show notes to the Clayco study about breaking the silence on mental health. Also check out the links in the show notes to preventconstructionsuicide.com and bantherapy.org. And with that, let's dive into the conversation. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Hey, Dan, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Please give us a quick introduction to who you are, who you work for, and specific the topic that we're going to be diving in here to today.
Sure. My name is Dan Lester, the Vice President of Field Culture and Inclusion here at the Clayco Enterprise. And my job is to really work on kind of the total health perspective of the enterprise in relation to our job sites and our culture. So looking at the recruiting, retention, workforce development efforts that pertain to our industry, but also what we're doing on our job sites to relationship to those things, which leads us to the topic today, which is mental health. And mental health is a growing kind of awareness topic in our industry. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us as a construction industry to really serve each other and serve one another by focusing on these things. And that's where we find value in our job sites.
Okay, so let's just start with some definitions. What do you mean by mental health?
I think a lot of folks have many definitions. I think it's a relatively well-adjusted kind of mannerisms or kind of people who are well-adjusted to the ordinary stresses of life, right? Normal things happen in the ordinary stress and the flow of life, but sometimes extraordinary circumstances happen. But how well we manage those things is how we kind of govern mental health, just the perspective of that.
Okay, so then what do you mean, or what are you thinking of when you use the phrase well-adjusted? What defines a well-adjusted person?
That's a good question. I think it might be different for everybody,
Yeah, I know.
How we adjust is kind of part of the give and take of what it requires, right? So many people, I think the generic forms of things you would say, you're able to maintain a level of, let's say in the professional world, a level of reasonable temperament. Construction that can sometimes get a little bit out of hand. And we have a little more grace in our industry, I think, but, well adjusted to those things. And what that means is you're kind of managing yourself, mindfulness and taking care of your body as much as you can and trying to, so it doesn't spill over into your personal life. And so if you think about what it looks like, it can spill over into your personal life. And if you're spending time at work, and work is stressful, and how well you manage that stressful situation then can spill over into your personal life. And I think the data shows that a lot of folks struggle with that when they come into our industry, and it's an occupational hazard, but there's a lot of things that we can do. So some folks go to counseling. That is a place that tends to help people. But, when you say adjusted, you're managing in a normal way. You have a day here, you have a day there, but you're not having to take weeks off or at a time to really garner your mental health. Now, if you do, it's okay. But that's where we start to raise the alarm.
So I know you mentioned some studies and statistics. What are some statistics that would be most relevant to the audience in terms of mental health in construction?
What's really interesting about it, Clayco commissioned a study in 2024. And out of the individuals that surveyed, you think 54% of those individuals said that in the last year they had experienced anxiety or depression. These are all tradespeople, and they experienced anxiety or depression within the last year. And it's interestingly enough, and out of those people, 39% of those folks said that they would feel ashamed to talk about mental health or substance misuse or suicide ideation or suicidal thoughts with a colleague. Now, I think what's interesting about what our study showed, the other converse of that is 94% of those folks that were surveyed said that they would be willing to assist a colleague if they knew they needed help. So you got 40% of folks that are afraid to talk about it. 94% says, hey, if you did talk about it, I'd be glad to help you out. So that's kind of where the opportunity lies in that gap, right? How do we bridge that gap for those who want to help each other and giving them the skills and the tools necessary to really support each other in a way that is well thought out and also helpful to each other?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So why do you think people are reluctant to talk to other people about some of the issues and challenges that they face?
That's a great question. I think pride comes into it, a lot of it. There is a sense of, a lot of the folks that struggle, our industry is dominated by a male-dominated industry. So, and men tend to be a little bit more or less open to talking about these things. We've gotten messages, whether it be perceived or real, that talking about these topics is a detriment to you, it makes you less of a man. And
Right.
then you also balance that with personal pride and that you can't handle it yourself. And many of us men are the fixers or the solution bearers in our homes or in our lives, in our daily lives, especially in the construction industry. We're a bunch of fixers every day, right? And
Yeah.
so we see problems and we want to solve them. And we see mental health as another problem that maybe we've tried to solve, or many of us or many folks just try to numb the pain so they can continue solving the other problems that are driving. And that kind of mismanagement or kind of the lack of a care or continued maintenance, if you will, maintenance is a good word for that, is where we kind of falter and really lose opportunities.
I would imagine that if some people are struggling with substance abuse, they would be reluctant to talk to someone because if they did, then maybe their job would be on the line, right?
Well, you're 100% right. And that's why the awareness of the conversation is extremely important at every level of industry, right? You're talking about with owners, with insurance, with the subcontractors, general contractors. You really need the entire industry to kind of be aware of this so that we can really support. And we kind of focus on psychological safety as our answer. That's the answer to it, which is it's basically a shared feeling that you can be open and honest in a group setting without fear of retaliation or purpose. Another author, Tim Clark, put it as it's a culture of rewarded vulnerability. So that's a strange word when you start talking to men about being vulnerable. Again, it goes to maybe taps the ego a little bit. But when we look at it in daily practice, we're saying that I have an open door policy, or really it comes by the leaders modeling that and saying to somebody, hey, you know what? I have days where I struggle, or sometimes I use personal stories and say, hey, it's okay to not be okay. Because if you don't know, and you know what, I think it's really interesting, Eric, we have in our industry that on day one, when most people come into our industry, everybody goes through a safety orientation. And on day one, they have a level of psychological safety. And that's called stop work authority, right? Everyone puts stop work authority. So that means that if you see something that is unsafe,
that's right.
You have the right. If you're the first person, it's your first day on the job, but you know that is unsafe, you have the authority to stop the entire work, stop whatever work is happening so that it can be assessed and become safe. That's a psychologically safe environment to be able to speak up when you see something that's wrong. Same thing for us internally, though. We have to just make sure it's okay. Because if I am driving one of your trucks or delivering something, and let's just say I'm operating your heavy machinery, and when I'm operating that, maybe I've taken some pills or to manage my pain, or even maybe let's say I'm high or under the influence of alcohol, whatever it is, right? And I recognize I have a problem. That's that 40% that says I've got a problem. So we have to be very verbal about how we allow people to say, hey, you know what? It's kind of like the Good Samaritan laws are that for the opioid crisis, right? So where, hey, ring the alarm. We would rather you tell us that you're struggling, rather tell us that you need help before you have an incident, right? Because as soon as you have an incident, what is the first thing we're going to do? We're going to drug test you. And then that's a
Yeah.
whole nother can of worms that we would rather avoid. Number one, for your safety and everybody else's safety on the project. So we'd rather you be able to come to us when you're struggling, when you've maybe recognized it, maybe after a toolbox talk that we've shared or after a safety standout. Today, we're in Mental Health Month, Mental Health Awareness Month. So lots of conversations probably are happening around job sites. I know on our job sites, they are around the country, really focusing on the factors of mental health. And maybe you heard that. Maybe you heard something and you said, you know what, that's me. And somebody told you that it's okay. And you go and raise your hand for help, hopefully before issues are risen.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Going back to the 54%, I wonder if we surveyed the entire population, if we would get a number similar to that, because that doesn't strike me as too high, right? I mean, I'm sure half of the people in the world have experienced some sort of level of anxiety or depression, so is construction really that unique as far as that's concerned? Or is it more, we want to highlight this because of the impact from a safety perspective of a workforce that is struggling with mental health and what they may do to deal with that, and therefore, as you're describing, how that affects the way they perform on the job?
Well, there have been studies, and so our industry is about 20% higher than the national average.
Ah, interesting.
So
Interesting.
that's an alarm perspective. But there's other categories where we are very high. We have the highest death from opioid overdose rate. Typically, people in our industry are prescribed 20% stronger opioids and 20% more opioids. We have a second heaviest alcoholism rate, a heavy alcoholism in our industry. And basically it's in our suicide rate is second, just only to mining and metallurgy. So when you start looking at the opportunities where you say, well, look, basically simply put, I think about 14 to 15 people a day are dying by suicide in our industry. So those are some shocking statistics, I think, that help us ring the alarm and hopefully allow us to say, you know what, let's start looking at ways to do it. So companies have started to manage things. And I know Clayco has been one of the first in the forefront to say, let's open this up. What can we do to support you within our purview, right? We only have so many people that we can really influence internally.
Yeah.
So what can we do to expand that impact? And that's what we did when we offered our employee assistance program to all of our tradespersons on our job sites across the country and their dependents, right? So they have the same access to those resources as I do. And that's a comprehensive, confidential resource for those individuals. So whether you have insurance or not, you get the same counseling sessions. A lot of people use it for legal services. We've helped folks with getting some representation for their child custody challenges and anything that might be removing your mind away from what we need on the job sites for tasks at hand. And that's just one of many opportunities that we have to really serve and to support.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today. Okay, so I think it's interesting, this idea of connecting safety with mental health and the idea of the safety stand downs, because if you can hook people's minds with something that they actually are supposed to do in their building, in their daily work, whether or not they're experiencing depression or mental issues, I think that's tremendously helpful. Do you find it effective for people to be speaking up in a group setting, or is it something where people want more one-on-one talk? Because I know some people don't mind, saying, hey, I got an issue in front of a whole bunch of people, but a lot of people are like, I'm at work here, right? We have our work mask on, right?
Yes.
And that's kind of appropriate in a certain way, that I've got my mask on at work. I mean, I don't necessarily want to know about all your issues. Now, as they affect the job, I do, but you know what I'm saying?
That's a very valid question and a very valid point because, again, that's their personal pride to say, hey, there's certain things you don't want to try to bring into the job or really take home, right? That's just a simple perspective. I think it takes a coordinated approach, right? It takes the person in the front of the room or doing the toolbox talk, if you will, or toolbox talks could be more of in your individual groups and more when you do the stand down from the higher level. Sometimes the owners join those conversations with the general contractors and we speak to those individuals and we kind of sound the alarm at a higher level. And you really kind of put it with some pomp and circumstance around your safety lunches where you're celebrating, let's say, number of days injury free or incident free, when you're celebrating just the general thing. So it's pomp and circumstance around it, rah, rah, rah. But also, hey, while we're talking about it, there's some opportunities that we could serve each other. So that's the first part. That doesn't save lives statistically. It helps to raise awareness, definitely. What saves lives is the community, right? It's the community of the job site. It is the smaller groups, the nucleus, the smaller kind of individual teams where, my leader, we're trying to encourage the four persons or whoever to be, or somebody to be that voice where if you know somebody around you that has said it's okay, whether they've divulged it themselves or they just said, listen, I've read this thing and it's okay, guys. Like we got real issues. Most people in our industry know somebody died by suicide or has been very close to. They either know them personally or they know of them, right? They've been impacted by it. And so it's not a difficult conversation. I have found very strong communities when you start talking about this on job sites and they'll pull you to the side. They'll come to you after you're finished talking. And sometimes, you ask them, hey, how you doing? And, I'm here if you need me. They don't take it. How you doing? Here if you need me. They don't take it. But one of those days when they gets to that point, they're going to reach out for somebody and having it. And so having that community saves each other's lives because when we're in community, they notice things about us that we don't notice about ourselves. And sometimes they're able to ring the alarm and say, hey, man, I noticed this behavior. Is everything okay? And that's where conversation starts.
Let's explore this a little bit. You shared that statistic, the difference between construction and the general population in terms of anxiety and depression, which is very helpful. I appreciate that. Does that then speak to the types of people that are attracted to work in construction, or does it speak to the environment of construction itself in terms of producing those types of statistics?
I think that's an also and question. I think it is by nature, our industry is a second chance industry for a lot of people. It is a second chance industry for some former addicts and some of those who have been justice involved. And so it allows them to be able to start a new career in a positive way that gets them along the lines. It doesn't necessarily, they're obviously in risk just because of historical references, but there are tons of occupational hazards that come with our industry, right? The physical, laborious nature of the work. It's just laborious, right? It's a hard industry and that's physically demanding on your body and the timelines and schedules. We have the needs are great. And so, everybody wants they want it faster, so we work with more overtime and those things are taxing. A lot of times individuals are traveling away from their family to go where the work is, right?
Yes.
And so if you're away from your family, that's you're away from your home support system, right? You might have your job support system. That's great. But like you mentioned, I've got on my work mask. And so I only let so much might seep out through my work mask that might be visible. But my wife or my spouse or my significant other at home, usually that's where the edges fray the most because that's who we're comfortable with. That's who we engage. That's we are in life with, right? So when people that we're doing life with tend to be a little more, we know that they'll give us a little more grace. And so sometimes they get the worst of our day. And so if you're away from your family, that can be another form of challenge. And so there's some occupational hazards that come with the job. And just like you think about our first responders, there's occupational hazards with what they do as well. But there are things that we can do to maybe make it easier to manage those occupational hazards and think about ways that we can talk about it. And talking about it has been one of the key ways to start. And then creating environments is another way. And how do you actually actionably put those into work?
Let's talk a little bit more then about the environment. What do you think are one or two things we could do other than talking about it, but in terms of the way we structure the environment? Is there anything we can change in construction that would reduce some of these external pressures that someone experiences and therefore responds to in a negative way?
One thing that pops out is, and it may not be a very largely popular topic, but it's the schedule. Schedule is a thing, and I think it's driven by owners and it's driven by a lot of different factors drive scheduling. But if we're able to ease off the schedule a little bit, that allows for maybe some folks to have less overtime. I know it's less money, but maybe more time with their families and less time on the job, or taking every so many days, making sure it's a mandatory fatigue day or something of that nature. And I think that's one of the biggest things and some owners have started to do things like that, but I think that's one of the biggest things that first starts there. And I think another tangible thing that we can do, and I've seen Clayco and other companies around the country start doing, is creating these wellness zones, right? These spaces that allow people to decompress. Maybe there might be ping pong tables and pool tables, couches. It's just a kind of an area that's kind of a sanctuary outside of the job site. It's kind of a small place. And it's a place where you start to be able to, if you do have people on site like we do, to be able to have some of those more private conversations and offer an opportunity. Maybe some of our projects have nurses on site, and those nurses are trained to have more of those difficult conversations. And we're looking to train more of our people. We use the Vital Cog training system, but we also have people on site in certain locations that travel around to really work to support our job sites on mental health and some of the retention efforts that we have.
What advice would you give to someone who knows that their buddy or someone who reports to them has an issue? What advice would you give? Because you can do sort of the drive-by kind of, hey, checking in, make sure everything's good. Hey, if you need anything, call me anytime. And it's easy to say that. But then how do you structure a conversation in such a way that it's most helpful to the person who has an issue and can result in some progress being made?
I think the relationship is important, right? Knowing who you're talking to is a key. And so, if you're talking to somebody who is typically reluctant to do it, you may offer to call the number for them, right? You might offer to, hey, is it okay if I call for you? Because maybe, sometimes I remember, Eric, my brother passed away in 2023, September, during Suicide Prevention Month from death by suicide.
Oh, wow.
And it was devastating for our family and even me as a practitioner. And I've been on this national stage talking about this, sounding the alarm internally, externally. But one of the hardest things to do for me was to pick up that phone and ask for help, even though I knew the number, even though I know the right thing to do. And so when people came in, my wife and others came and called me and came to me, it was more helpful. It was easier for me to engage when I knew that, or when I had their support, or when they offered to call. And maybe I didn't, in that case, I called on my own, but them offering kind of made me see, hey, you know what, this is something I really need to get on. And it took me a while. And I know we all process in our own time, but I was back at I was back at the office, I was back working. And I still hadn't fully managed or kind of really dealt with what I needed to deal with from a personal level. And so if you have somebody who, the relationship dictates how we really, go about engaging with them. And I think that's why the personal communication is important, because, if you're a manager and you've got some skills that, that's part of one of the things that we have to do in our industry is to really, sidebar here, kind of really talk to our leadership about how proper management techniques, some of the times the way we respond, the way, my wife will always say something like this, and you may have heard this before, Eric. She'll say, it's not what you said, but it's how you said it. Yeah. Yep. And so what that means is how you corrected somebody on the bad day. And maybe they're having a bad day. They may be, because some of the risk signs are being distracted. Or maybe you're causing a safety incident. So you might actually be a problem that we need to manage, or something you might have some concerns that we need to address. So if you have concerns that we need to address in those spaces, how are we able to do it? If we have somebody checking on you, I would rather somebody who's close to you be able to say, we're noticing your edges are fraying a little bit. What can we do to support you? And hey, if you need anything, let me know. But if it's a safety concern, that opens up the door for the conversation to really increase, right? And whether right, wrong, or indifferent, it's an opportunity. And any opportunity we can get for folks to get help, is a great chance.
Going back to your own personal experience, it sounds like it took you a while to have the conversation. When you did have a conversation, I'm not looking for details, but what was most helpful to you in having the conversation? What changed as a result of that?
Sometimes it's just talking to somebody that's low risk, right? It's not your family member. It's not a
Yeah.
friend. You don't have to feel judged by what you're feeling. I felt very guilty.
Yes.
I felt very guilty
Yeah.
because you talk about things with people everywhere else,
Yep.
but you try to be good and you don't bring it home, right?
Yeah.
Or you don't
Yep.
always bring it home. And so while I sounded the alarm to many people about the risk factors or what to do, I didn't talk to my family about it. So it may or may not have made a difference, right? But because I think we did some of the right things, or some of the folks that knew about it were doing the right things. And so
Yeah.
ultimately it's his decision. But there was my own level that I stressed. So it was just knowing that giving that burden to somebody else that I didn't feel like, because, if I told my wife, she would have taken on that burden for herself,
Yeah.
right? She would have
Yeah.
wanted to take that from me. And I didn't want to give that to her. So that's kind of what talking to somebody can do. I think a lot of folks say, I wouldn't talk. Why would I talk to a stranger? It's amazing that sometimes you don't need 6 sessions. Sometimes a couple of sessions talk. I only took 2,
Yeah.
right? Just talking to somebody and just having somebody affirm what you feel, that is a professional that knows how to listen and engage, was helpful for me. And so for a lot of folks, it is being in a place where it's safe, that they know it's confidential. I think being confidential is extremely important, because let's just say I didn't tell you I have a drug problem, but I
Yeah.
need to get drug problem assistance. You
Yeah.
don't have to come tell me. And even then, we don't know what we just know what person, the individual services were accessed, right? So we pay for it. It's free for them. So get them the counseling that they need, or, and you can freely talk and don't have to worry about them saying, hey, this person is a threat. None of that's going to happen. And we've seen a lot of people, what I've really seen has been very heartwarming, is that a lot of people are standing up for others. I know one of the jobs, I had a story last year where the team noticed that one of their colleagues, one of our superintendents, was having some rough moments with people. He was rubbing in very raw moments.
Yeah.
And he was a veteran,
Yep.
but he had been through therapy before. He had done
Yep.
some of the work before, but he was becoming raw around the edges, right? That's why that maintenance comes in. And
Yeah.
even as a superintendent, his team sounded the alarm and gave him a day off. And he and I talked, and he hadn't even thought about reaching out for help again,
Yeah.
because, you'd done the work. And he's like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, what's that number? He reached out back to work in no time. And what it was inspiring was it was the teammates that called and made sure that the individual had what they needed.
It's interesting. I think that confidentiality is important. I think some of the challenge when it comes to work specifically, I can see outside of work, I could talk to a psychologist or a counselor, a pastor, or a friend, and where that person is connected to work. If I'm you, for instance, and I work for Clayco and I'm having a conversation, let's say with a superintendent or a foreman, they do have a drug problem, that then obviously can have a direct impact not only on them, but also on the safety of a job and therefore on other people.
Yeah.
So at what point do you actually have an obligation to break that confidentiality because of the potential impact on other people? How do you handle that?
It's a great question. So we have a group called Clayco Cares. It's our mental health and well-being group. And they like to do some training on that, but also we do it in kind of our leadership training in those on the Clayco side. But it's the case of all safety incidences, right? If there's a safety concern that rises to that level, we have to mitigate that concern. Now,
Right.
you don't have to talk about the reasoning. So we've had incidences where people have had challenges. And so those folks were able to be, let's say, removed or repositioned for a period of time
Yes.
while they, without having a incident, without there being a situation, they moved to another project, whatever you do to kind of keep their confidentiality. But you have to talk to the people within inside of your business. It could be your HR team. We don't have HR at Clayco, but our talent management team, or your safety professionals, and they'll elevate it as needed. But you sound the alarm to your leaders that we've got an issue. And that's what you want, right? You want people to say, there's a problem. Let's get in front of it. Thank you for telling me. That's where the rewarded vulnerability that we mentioned earlier for psychological safety comes in. When you reward that, thank you for telling me, let's get you some help. So you call and you get a backup superintendent or foreman to the job, and really just kind of move some things like we would do anything. If you had any other medical condition or safety incident, and we would just band together. And that's what we're trying to get to as an industry, where it's okay to say, look, I'd rather you tell me today that you got a problem, or right now that you have an issue. It's okay. We just want you to get moving. Now, that's where some challenges start to kind of bring themselves up, though, when you start talking about how you're going to get paid. If I need to take a day off
Yeah.
or 5, and
Yeah.
and I'm in a place where I'm not salaried, so I got to miss a week of pay in order to get the help I need. And I don't know if there's many good options so far yet on that, right? I mean, you got
I would imagine it kind of depends on the person, because I mean, I'm just talking from a strictly a business perspective. If I've got a high performer who's got an issue, I may be inclined to show them a lot more grace than a low performer who has an issue. And I'm like, yeah, I thought you had an issue, and now let me help you find employment elsewhere. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, you can give them support right now. You can give them, notice their issue, point them to the support that we have. You're experiencing this on our job site. Please use this resource. You can use our code and access the resource. Then after you've accessed the resource, we're still going to have to ask you to find employment somewhere else, but we have not left you without some support.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there isn't necessarily a perfect answer to this.
No, I think there's some mandatory PTO or mandatory sick leave laws that are coming into effect now that might change, at least getting a day or two here or there for folks. But, I think ultimately that's just the nature. So I think what you do is, as a company, you say, if you do have a high performer that you need, take the time that you need. Let's get you help. Let's get you the support that you need with minimal impact to your family. And I think that's what I've seen a lot of folks in Clayco do, and even other folks in the industry that are trying to be forward thinking about it. Hey, if you're a high performer, and not just if you're a high performer, you really want folks to feel valued. But, when you got 1,200, 2,000 people on a project, it can be very difficult to assess that. So you really have to say that's really goes into the internal company, right? So Clayco may not meet, we just might be the general contractor.
Right.
But a subcontractor can say, well, you work for me and I want to keep you on. And so you might be using my EAP services, but your company's deciding to pay you 60% if you've got they've worked out some sort of short-term disability kind of engagement for you. That could be opportunity. So I think that's where the biggest challenge comes in, is missing work, and how do you do it? Because like we mentioned earlier, many of us are the breadwinners or a significant number of that. And if without some sort of cushion, it can be challenging to even access the support when you need it.
As a GC, does Clayco put into its contracts anything related to mental health in terms of how it interacts with the subs?
I'm not sure if it's in contracts, but our safety program is in contracts, right? So,
and this is an element of the safety program.
Exactly.
There
right?
You go.
So it's an element of the safety program. And I do believe language has begun to be used, at least in our documentation. We've definitely talked about this all the time. We ring the alarm. And in fact, we just had Safety Week, and a couple weeks ago at the beginning of May. And one of our things during Safety Week, we put out poker chips. Our poker chips have the 988 number, which is the mental health and suicide prevention hotline, national hotline number. So 988 is the number that you dial as opposed to 911. Medical emergencies, you dial 988 for mental health and suicide emergencies. So we put that information on the QR code, and we also give the EAP number. And so that 800 number, and there's a QR code on the back of it where you can scan and have access to other resources as well. And so we did that. Plus every year we've done something during Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May. And then we've also done something in September. So companies have opportunities to kind of, share out their things. But the more people know how to access data and, where it can be found, and really what we're trying to do is start to get to families too. We just had a health fair in our St. Louis office. It's first of many around our regional offices to really, get people to start to access all of the benefits. Because many people have benefits that they don't know how to access them or don't know. Studies show that most people don't know how to access their resources, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm curious, sometimes when people have an issue, they talk to the wrong person. So it's like, I'm not trying to make light of it though, but it's like if I've got an alcohol problem and I go talk to an alcoholic who has the same problem, I might get some sympathy, but I may not get many solutions. You know what I'm saying?
True. But, we would tell you to go to a counselor, right? Access the resources. They'll get you into a program. But even if that, a lot of folks sometimes just need a meeting. And so get to a meeting, or, because if you get to a meeting, you are talking to other alcoholics or other people that have struggled similarly, but they have also, I think it's also more encouraging for some folks who deal with the challenges of their addictions, is knowing that somebody who's been where I have been
Yep.
has taken the steps to overcome it. So when I do have that urge to partake, they know the skills, they know what I mean, and they know white knuckling it or, kind of pushing through it may not always be the best choice. So what can I do to deal with the things that are the stimuli?
Yep.
Or not stimuli. Well, the stimuli may never change. Stresses
Sure.
are always going to manage.
It's the response,
So then,
huh?
how do we respond? So teach
Yeah,
people
yeah.
better skills to respond.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview. It's interesting because one of the pushbacks against some of this is just like someone would take advantage potentially of a sick day, quote unquote, right? Is there some fear with companies that, if I roll out a program like this, it's like, you all got issues, man. It's like, that's part of being a human being is suffering and difficulty and challenge and even depression or anxiety. How much of this is like, we don't need to be so therapeutic. We need to be a little more perhaps mature and not overdo stuff and not magnify an adverse condition and seek sympathy when perhaps what I need to learn to do is to suffer a little bit.
That is an interesting perspective when you think about suffering. I think in reality, a lot of ways, maybe we've suffered enough. Maybe the fact that I'm hourly, maybe the fact that I know it's hot outside. Like right now in our Phoenix office, it's well over 100 degrees right now,
Yeah.
right? And so I know it's going to be hot. Yes, you definitely can amplify more breaks. And that's enough, take micro breaks and make sure there's water and chill zones. We have what we call chill zones. Yes. But at the end of the day, that has a toll on your body, right? And and people can have serious injury from heat.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we have to take it seriously. So yes, some people may take advantage, but I think by and large, the majority of people want to go to work. The majority of people that are out there want to be at work. They're not trying to find ways out of work. Yes, you do have to learn how to adjust. And that's where your leadership comes in. That's where the legacy talent, if you will, your mentors are there to say, hey, make sure you're taking care, especially the new talent. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Hey, I know you want to lift this 100-pound thing by yourself, but anything over 50, we're supposed to team lift it. Why? Because today you can lift that 100-pound plate or whatever, that lumber beam. But in 10 years, you doing that is your back's going to be shot, your shoulder's going to be shot, and then just maintenance. And then that's going to lead to pain. And then how you manage pain challenges your temperament and then just makes for challenging more things. So yes, it's an opportunity, but I really think people are more reluctant to use it because of the perceived stigma. There were studies that came out, just said people feel ashamed, right? And those numbers have gotten better because it used to be in the 70% where people felt ashamed or didn't feel like they could talk. So we're getting better, but I think we also have to just think about it that, there's going to be many people that, like me, would rather suffer in silence or get help in silence.
Yes.
The whole point of it is that that's typically where the challenges lie. When you're not in community, when you're alone by yourself, that's when those demons proverbially reign the loudest.
Yeah.
So that's why we try to support people. We've had some case studies recently where we had a chance to really support in a major way. Now, there's a level where our support stops, but we were able to get some support for that person. And follow-up is also extremely important. So once you do give somebody support, how we follow up with them. So we've seen benefits from that. Matter of fact, our EAP, our external numbers over the last couple of years have increased by about 350% from our subcontractors using the resource, which is great, right? That means they're accessing it when they need it. And And then internally for our own employees, we've increased about 200%. So individuals have really been increasing the usage of the resources, which is great. But it just lets us know that, hey, people are accessing it. More and more people are finding out about it. But, you just have to keep talking about it. And so folks like me, conversations like this, articles, anything that we can do to elevate the conversation is helpful, because we'll catch somebody that we didn't catch the last time. And every time I talk, somebody else is saying thank you. And it usually it's maybe the roughest, toughest dude, the guy that was in the
Totally.
back, just mean mugging me with the face of
Yeah,
death.
right.
And he comes up and he comes up and shows you a tattoo on his forearm of his friend or somebody. And it builds bridges, and it really just helps us build a better culture in general. And so there's long-standing implications by focusing on culture, focusing on that psychological safety that really put us in a place to not only deal with mental health, but also better outcomes from our recruiting efforts to keep apprentices there. Why?
Yeah,
Because we're dealing with how we talk to each other. That manages the stresses of our day. And so if you're learning better skills as a leader, you have better outcomes. And sometimes then you can learn how to slow down to speed up, right? So taking a break. Sometimes I remember studying in college where you get to a certain point where you're not going to retain anything. Just
that's
take
right.
a quick break and then come back. And then you realize you can speed on away much faster than if you just push through.
One thing I was thinking about is the gap between the office and the field, right? And so a lot of these initiatives are going to be driven by people in the office down to the field. But it seems like, or I could understand how the office would kind of forget at times the stresses of the people in the field. So, it's like, why are you tripping, man? I mean, I'm working 40, 50 hours a week here in my air conditioned office taking care of issues. And you should be able to work 40 and 50 hours a week yourself out on the job site. But there's a forgetting of what's actually going on out there with the physical and the mental tolls and the pressures and the safety issues all compounding. And so it seems like the executive part of the company needs to really do a lot of work understanding the issues that the field is facing, not only in just production or quality, but in these areas of mental health that you're talking about.
You're right. I think awareness is a key thing for leadership. And we have had very significant efforts to try to get office folks out to the job site at some
Yeah.
point to
Yeah.
experience that.
Yeah.
We have opened doors for our Clayco network of women. They have opened doors to do job site tours for anybody who is normally not usually doing it. And just again, because you don't know what you don't know. And then presentations, right? I think our leaders initially, when I first started talking about this many, many years ago, the reluctancy to talk about it was kind of standard to what you see initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the awareness, the data points, and more studies came out. And once they did, I think they really began to see that there was value, and the data was showing that. So not only is the data staggering when you start looking at the number of people, I think folks started to experience the pandemic. The pandemic really helped shine kind of a intense focused light on mental health in our industry. We got to sit down and see people in that moment. We were kind of stressed out, sheltered in place, many places, but 10 feet apart, other places, yet you're considered essential and all that happening. So, but it highlighted it. So once we got a grip of that, our leaders, once they grip on it, it expanded. And so anytime you see it, most of these initiatives, if they're successful, sometimes the ground is swelling for sure. But yet the executive got the point. They got the message. And then that's where the funding comes in. That's where the heightened attention comes in. And when your executives start to speak about it, when they begin to share about their own personal struggles, or even allow it to even be shared by other leaders, it's extremely impactful for those people. And so what I've noticed is that the more we talk about it, the more people speak up about their challenges. The more people will email me and say, how do I get involved? Or we have ways for folks to get anonymous support through our Clayco Cares team.
Yep.
And that just says, hey, not only do you have internal support with internally in Clayco, but you also have the external resources that we have as well. So I think once owners or leaders or the executives get that message, and if they're working on, we call it the golden hour, that morning time where you're going out in the morning, stretch and flex, where things are fresh, spending time talking to people. We encourage all our people on job sites, even if you're on a site. Sometimes if you're on sites, doesn't mean you actually are walking the job. So we encourage our teams to do walks at least twice a week to make sure that you are, again, experiencing the same things that they are experiencing. And so Yes, there's disconnections, but I think the awareness is raised. And so the more we do presentations, the more we do toolbox talks. We just did for Mental Health Awareness Month, Clayco did a training Tuesday. We do a monthly all company training, virtual training, and our training Tuesday topic was about mental health. So we talked about it with our safety training director, myself, and one of our employees shared their personal story. And it was very successful. And so those things help to highlight and educate our executives.
As someone's listening to this, they may think, well, I don't have a formal program in place. Obviously, at Clayco, you guys have done a lot of work on it. Why don't you give us, as we're wrapping up here, 2 or 3 immediate first steps that a company can take to kind of get their arms around the mental health issue and, like you said, create that psychological safety and a place where people are more willing to talk so that they can deal with some of these issues and ultimately perform better on the job site?
Sure. There's a couple of resources off the top of my head that are relevant. I think the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, their website is preventconstructionsuicide.com. They have tons of free resources and connections to various other aspects through that avenue. That's one of the places where I first started to cut my teeth on the data, because you need to find out what the issue is. And they've also done a lot of work to help you start to deal with how to really support it and engage with it at a base level. The other one that comes to mind for our industry, which it seems a little funny, but a lot of work went into it, is this thing called mantherapy.org. Man Therapy, it follows a fictional character named Dr. Ron Mahogany, who really goes to talk about, says things like you can't fix mental health with duct tape. And it really kind of is pointed toward men and kind of the stereotypes of not getting it. But in that website, it's been very effective across the industry. You can do a mental health assessment to see where you are, and then other resources come out of there. But companies need to start doing their own research. If you haven't done the research, getting the awareness raised, and then, start to roll out a plan as far as to figure out how you're going to socialize the need. Chances are when you start to socialize the need, more people will want to be involved in that effort. And then, you put a plan together to really, if you do have some things you need to change, I think you have to model the behavior first.
Yeah.
If we want people to speak up, we as leaders have to speak up first. And it's vulnerable. Yes. It is stressful. Yes. You might not get a attaboy or a pat on the back when you say it, but chances are somebody's going to resonate with it. And when they do resonate with it, it's going to be a significant impact. So it helps to raise the alarm. It helps to be verbal and vocal and visible. So if you're visible about it, if you're vocal about it, it is very helpful for folks to really start to see the value. And then you start to notice the passion that other people have, there's so many people that are impacted by these stories themselves that they want to help and support in any way they can. And so that's what's really driving our industry now: volunteers, peer support, and the awareness of the conversation.
Excellent. So we're going to have links in the show notes to mantherapy.org and also preventconstructionsuicide.com. Also, we'll put a link in the show notes to connect with you, Dan, on LinkedIn.
Sure.
And I really appreciate your time here. I got to ask a question. I know you're in St. Louis, and
Yes.
there's always the argument, which barbecue is the best. And I'm assuming that you believe that St. Louis is the best barbecue. So what is the one spot in St. Louis I need to hit the next time I'm in town?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to probably get in trouble for this comment, right? I don't know, everybody has their place, but I'll tell you, there's a chain that's in St. Louis, started here, that's not terrible. St. Louis is definitely better. Okay. No doubt. I think Sugar Fire Barbecue is a great place to cut your teeth on some St. Louis barbecue. That is, they have a consistently good product on a regular basis. The brisket is phenomenal. They got a lot of great stuff there. And they change on a consistent basis, kind of really good style. So that's a place my family and I love to go. But St. Louis barbecue there's many places around that you can cut your teeth on some good Q. And then coming up on the holiday, it's happening. And, and one other thing, if we're talking about this, but, St. Louis is currently experiencing some challenges from a tornado, right? And
wow.
So we had a tornado F3 come through last week, last Friday. And so there have been a lot of barbecue, so to speak, but, people are supporting folks. I think it's been amazing to see the city of St. Louis come together and support each other. And Clayco has been out there, as well as other contractors in the forefront supporting people. And so these are opportunities for, that's where mental health challenges go up in times of crisis.
Totally.
So it's good to be out there and handling that.
Great. We'll have a link to Sugar Fire Smokehouse in the show notes as well next time you're in St. Louis. Dan, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing some of your story and giving us some great insights here. I know it's been tremendously helpful.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, Eric. Love being on the show.
Right on. Thank you for listening to today's conversation with Dan. Again, mantherapy.org, preventconstructionsuicide.com, and then also Clayco's report on breaking the silence and mental health. All of those links are in the show notes, along with the Sugar Fire Smokehouse for a little barbecue next time you're in St. Louis. Thank you for listening to Construction Genius today. Share this interview with anyone who you think would benefit from listening to it, and also give us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity. And to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.